Good morning. My name is Isiah. I am a couples therapist, a sexologist, and a sex therapist. And while I stand here in front of you quite confident and comfortable talking about sex today, I can promise you that it wasn't always this way for me. So I remember sitting in a garden at a cocktail party with some friends on a really sunny Saturday afternoon. It was about 10 years ago in one of UK's capital cities. And as a born and bred country girl from Australia who'd just moved to the bright lights of the big city, I was quite shocked by their conversation. By our third jug of Pimm's, the conversation turned to men and sex and some of the things my friends had tried. I wasn't just shocked that they were talking about sex, I was shocked at how openly they were talking about it. And I didn't know that some of those things that they'd tried even existed outside of urban myth. I certainly didn't know that women could actually enjoy them. See, sex wasn't talked about in my house growing up. Put your hand up if you can relate to that. Yeah. Except for once when my mum felt like she had to give me the talk and she quickly read that Where Did I Come From book, but then we both felt so awkward about it we never spoke about it again. And then once when I overheard my mum talking with her girlfriends from the next room about how they were avoiding having sex with their husbands. And yet all around me in the media I was hearing that sex is the most wonderful thing on earth and that everyone really wants to have it. It's no wonder I grew up with some quite confusing messages around sex. And to be honest, most of us do. So sex is a skill. It's something that we learn. And yet we all just expect ourselves to know it. And we feel bad about ourselves if we have questions, if we have challenges, or if we're not getting it perfect. We think that everyone else has the perfect relationship and an incredible sex life. But as a couples therapist and a sex therapist, I can promise you that none of us have it perfect. We all have questions about sex. We've all wondered if we're normal, and we all secretly want to know how we can make it better as well. Sex is a skill. It's something that we learn. And I hear people say, but sex is natural. It is natural. I like to compare it to running. We can all run if we want to. But if we want to be really good at it, if we want to enjoy it, if we want to avoid injury, we get some information about it. We find out the best techniques. We maybe see a coach or a therapist. And we might even buy some gear to help us along in our journey. So sex is a skill. It's something that we learn. It's something that we learn through information, through being taught, through practice. For most of us, our sex education was woefully inadequate. Along with my sex education at home, I also learnt some things at school. This education focused on the biology of reproduction, and most importantly, how not to get pregnant. My overall message from school was that the best way not to get pregnant and to avoid sexually transmitted infections was not to have sex at all. Yes, it's true, but it's not very practical in the real world, and it's not very helpful to a teenager whose hormones are going crazy. So this kind of sex education, or lack of education, impacts all of us. And I see these impacts in my work every day. So I wasn't taught about pleasure. I wasn't taught about intimacy. I wasn't taught about consent or all the wonderful ways that my body or someone else's body can be enjoyed. I was taught that something called foreplay exists, but I wasn't taught why it's important, how long it should go for, or what actually is foreplay. Like, what actually counts as foreplay? And that's something that I get asked about on a regular basis by my clients. Just for the record, women's bodies need at least 15 to 20 minutes in order to fully prepare for sex. Our bodies go through complex changes as we become aroused, like needing to lubricate, the vaginal canal going through a process called tenting, where it opens, and the muscles holding the uterus in place contract, pulling the uterus and cervix out of the way so it doesn't get hit by a penetrating object. If we're spending less than 15 to 20 minutes in foreplay, we're going to have an increased chance of feeling pain during sex. We're going to experience less pleasure, and we're going to dramatically decrease our chance of reaching orgasm. So spending time in foreplay is important, and just so we're clear as well that anything that isn't penetration sex, like cuddling, kissing, touching each other, oral sex, that all counts as foreplay, and it's all really important. I still work with women who aren't sure where their clitoris is. Just a couple of years ago, I had a woman walk into my office and say she wasn't really enjoying sex. She'd lost her desire, and there were a few questions told us more about why. In explaining her sexual activity, she told me, "My husband always tries to touch that front bit thing." "The front bit thing?" I said. "Yeah, you know, that bit, that thing at the front." Now, thankfully, I have a vulva puppet in my office. I'm not sure about you, but it comes in handy on a regular basis. And we were able to discover that front bit thing she was talking about was her clitoris, and she didn't like the way her husband was touching it. Well, after we talked about it for a minute, I was able to let her know that it's actually quite pleasurable for some women, and show her on the puppet a few different ways that she might touch it that could feel good. She rang me later in the week exclaiming, "Oh my God, fathers, that front bit thing you told me about, it's amazing." And she had had her first ever orgasm at the age of 42. I talked to many women and men who aren't actually sure if the G-spot exists, let alone know where to find it. I talk to men who tell me they're experiencing premature ejaculation because they can only last for 15 minutes, not the hour that they see depicted in porn. If only they knew that the average length of penetration sex was 7 minutes, and the women I talk to often don't want penetration sex to last for an hour because they get sore. I speak to women who struggle with desire and their interest and pleasure around sex. They tell me that it's a biological fact or their age that has it diminish. But they don't understand that sexual desire isn't spontaneous. It's not something that appears for a certain part of our lives and then turns off for the rest of our lives. It's responsive, so it responds to stimuli around us. Women at any age experience a spike in desire when they get into a new relationship. And that there are certain things that we can do to help that desire respond, to cultivate our desire, our interest in sex, and our pleasure. We're also increasingly hearing about the orgasm gap. It's a cultural phenomenon where in heterosexual sexual encounters, men are more than twice as likely to reach orgasm as women. I was barely taught about one kind of orgasm in my sex education. I certainly wasn't taught that there are over 7 kinds of orgasm that women can have, that there are numerous kinds of orgasms that men can have, and I certainly wasn't taught how to have them. And let me promise that knowing all these different ways that we can experience pleasure makes a huge difference to our relationship and our lives. Sex is an important part of our intimate relationships. It can be the glue that holds the relationship together. When we engage in loving sex with someone, our bodies release oxytocin, a hormone that helps us feel bonded and connected. Sex can boost our confidence, can help us feel sexier and more alive. It has numerous health benefits, and it's also a mood enhancer, so it can ease mild depression and anxiety. Studies have shown that having sex the night before also makes us more productive at work the next day. So if you're a lady or a man who likes to get a lot done, a thriving sex life can help you. Sex is important, and it's also a skill that we learn. Like learning any new skill, it requires that we give ourselves permission, that we find out information, that we find different techniques, and that we practice. Sex is a skill that we learn, and my vision for the world is that we live in a world where people are given the right information, where they're able to talk about it and seek out the information that they want, so they learn the information and the practical skills that can help them feel confident, experience the heights of pleasure, and also the depths of intimacy that come as a result.